Welcome to the Tuesday edition of Unexpected Points. I am joined once again by everyone's favorite data scientist, Ben Brown. Today, we're going to review all of the Week 15 action, including some not so thrilling games on Monday night, but there are some takeaways from those. And we're going to figure out what's going on in the NFL that couldn't decide how to score this weekend and has started to have some clarity at the top. So let's get to it. All right, Ben, welcome back for week 2 here. What I've decided this time is I think last time I was rushing through a little bit. You know, I'm not used to necessarily having the guest on the other side. So sometimes I feel like I'm moving forward. Maybe I was even cutting you off a little bit sometimes. So we're going to try to rectify it this time and let you have your opinions and your takes for this show. Does that sound good?
I mean, that sounds good to me. I think my first take is that I don't know if I'm everybody's favorite data scientist at PFF. I might just be like maybe the least controversial or something like that. But people definitely come at me for my betting takes. But that's really all I get in them streets about. So we'll see that. Well, I'm going to have to push back on that first one, I guess.
What I think is that all data scientists are just equally hated. So in some ways, you're everyone's favorite and everyone's least favorite, and we're all just the same. We're part of the people are getting annoyed out in the streets about these analytics conversations, getting annoyed at both sides. There's a lot of both sidesism going on out here about the annoying people who are right, I would say, about what they're saying, and the annoying people who are completely wrong about they're saying. I view the two camps differently generally in life when I'm doing that, but some don't. So some want to be annoyed by us. But you know what we're going to do? We're just going to double down and be more annoying. That's what I say. That's the way it works here. But anyway, so the format as usually is we go through the games. We still have 2 games on Tuesday night, and I went through the Thursday night game last Friday. So that leaves us with, let me do my math here. It leaves us 13 games to go through here. And we'll start with the Monday night games. We'll start with the late game, which probably got, unfortunately for the people out there, probably got the most viewers since it was a later game here. But we have the Vikings at the Chicago Bears. The Vikings were 7-point favorites. It was a 47 total on this one. Final score, whopping 17-9. And, I may need to triple check my numbers on this because I'm just I was shocked by my adjusted number. I think it was inflated a little bit by the fact that there were so many possessions in this game because neither team could do anything. And that's one of the movers in mine. But I actually had the Bears being better by a score of 30-16. Now those numbers are too high. So it's probably more like 24-12 or something like that. What do you think initially, just right off the top? Could there be a case that the Bears were just actually the better team in this game, despite the fact that they had 3 points until their final drive of the game?
Yeah, I mean, so we look at it, basically the Vikings were like negative 0.3 EPA per pass play. I think the Bears overall had maybe just a slightly worse EPA per offensive play, but the Vikings just clam up, right? It's awful watching them play a sort of miserable team like the Chicago Bears. Essentially what they did in the second half, come out, score on their first possession, and then they're like 3 and out, rush, punt. So it's just brutal. They just cannot put teams away. And granted, Bears finally got the late touchdown, didn't even have time to kick the field goal and try and, push the cover on the spread or anything like that.
Yeah, but the important thing. Let's the
important things in the matter. But yeah, to be honest with you, I thought, there were certain stretches where Justin Fields moved the ball decently well, not necessarily overly great. I think they were Vikings kind of cashed in on their red zone opportunities. Yeah. Bears not necessarily in the same manner. So maybe that's a little bit why your adjusted scores leaned in the Bears direction so much, but not a lot of takeaway. Both these teams are trending in the absolute wrong direction for me. My only question is how long are we going to hang on to this Matt Nagy business, and how long are we actually going to hang on to this Mike Zimmer
Island
business?
Games? Island Games have killed many a coach. So this is a possibility here, because not only do we have the loss, we have some sloppy personal fouls that ended up having this game. We had Nagy, having an aneurysm on the sideline multiple times, arguing about this stuff. So yeah, it was not a good look for him. And I think the Bears fans have kind of taken this at almost just in a joking manner about some of this. It was so pathetic at times. But let me dig into some of the stuff behind why I had the Bears as being valued so much. So you're right. This was a game where the Vikings were doing everything in their power to give it away. Right. And the Bears were doing everything they could to not take it. It was like a game of hot potato. They were just throwing the thing back and forth, not wanting to have any chance of getting stuck with the victory in this game. I mean, the Vikings averaged 3.2 yards per play in this game. They were doing absolutely nothing. The Bears had the ball 7 times on the Vikings side of the field and had 3 points before that final drive. Right. So this was actually one of these funny games. If you want to be, and this is a term I'm stealing from Daniel Popper, who is the athletic writer for the Los Angeles Chargers, when discussing that game, the hindsight vultures, which he's talking about, which I like this, is the people who just kind of swoop over the 4th down decisions and then come down immediately when they see that someone has died based upon the 4th down decisions. You couldn't actually be critical of the 4th down decisions here because they were down by so much. But if you start doing the math and you say, hey, if they would have taken, the 5 field goal opportunities that they had, even though they were down by so much, and you just assume the Vikings never score again at that point, they actually maybe could have won this game if they would have kicked every single time. So it just kept on rolling and getting worse and worse and worse with those 4th down opportunities. And you mentioned Fields. I think this is probably the only real takeaway that we can get from here, other than the Vikings are still in it, and we hope we don't see that Vikings team in the playoffs that played this way. So Fields had a 72 grade, but his EPA per play was not very good. He had the fumble on a rushing play early, which was very costly. His first 2 sacks were, I think, 14 yards each, which is impressive. Like, I don't even know how you do that, quite honestly. Taking 14-yard sacks. And then on the 4th down play, it kind of looked like no one knew what was going on. He rolled out, and then he took another sack on that one. So my thing on Fields is, I don't know how to feel about him. I think that he looks okay. He's showing something, but then what he's showing on the negative side, taking the sacks, poor decision-making as far as being able to do things quickly, not being on the same page as his receivers, or seeming like the play is a little bit off. All those things coming together are probably concerns that you would have had from him before he started, but like coming in as a rookie. So the fact that those are being reinforced in some ways is a little bit more negative, because you think, hey, maybe this will continue going forward.
Right. Yeah, I agree with you. I do think there were some positives, and there were things that we kind of saw even at the college level with them, right? Like looking back Monday night, 86% adjusted completion percentage. Bears did have 5 drop passes. So from that perspective, with an 8.0 average depth of target, like the potential is there, it seems like, in a lot of situations. But I agree with you 100%. The sacks, especially in the manner and way that he tries to get away from the sacks, is just causing those plays to be even more significantly minus EPA than what they have to be. I think if he, could limit some of those plays, he's going to be much better off, because he does have a pretty decent floor with which to build off of. But I want to go back. I don't want to derail the podcast so quickly, so early, but the 4th down decision-making, I think that you touched on is interesting, because the other side, I would say, never really thinks about the incentives that happen when teams actually do kick those field goals. And that is something that we try and take into account. And that's something that, Eric Eager, Dr. Eric Eager from the research.
Yeah, make sure you throw a doctor in there.
Got to get the doctor in there. But that's something that he kind of talks about quite a bit, right? Is like the incentive changes when teams kick field goals versus not. So maybe that's a point where the Vikings end up getting more aggressive if the Bears maybe potentially settle for 1 or 2 of those field goals. But they were down so much already. It probably didn't matter. But I do think that is something to at least consider in the 4th down decision making, that a lot of people just gloss over if like you said, they are like the hindsight vultures and just kind of swoop in.
Yeah. Well, I don't think this game actually falls into that. I don't think anyone was arguing at the time, when they were not moving the ball at all, that the Vikings would never score again, and so on and so forth. But I just thought it was a little bit interesting there. And again, when it comes to Fields, it's just something to look going forward. I know that there was like a whole thing in the offseason where I think some people got scared off of criticizing Fields after Dan Orlovsky, relayed some anonymous information about his work habits, and then it became like a whole thing about sabotaging behind his back, tropes about black quarterbacks and so on and so forth. I mean, I'll tell you that I've talked. So people who would know about in the NFL about Justin Fields coming out, I mean, there's a reason that he did slip in the draft, and whether it's correct or not, or it should have happened or not, I don't know. But he was getting hammered by old coaches in college, I think mostly in Georgia, for some of these things about, and then when he's not on the same page as receivers, you start to wonder about that. Our friend over at the Ringer, Ben Solak, he had something about how he's never on the same page with any of his receivers. And that was more posed as a fact that, maybe it's a coaching issue, something like that. Well, I mean, if you have 4 or 5 receivers who are on one page and then you have one quarterback who's on the other page, like it starts to see, there's like a common denominator here that goes on. And if you're not seeing it with Dalton, you have to start to wonder about those things. But again, it's really early in his career, so you're not burying anyone, but it is a little concerning if it's the same sorts of things that are coming up over and over again.
Right, definitely. And I think you bring up a really good point. I think we'll probably get into my question that pertains to that overall concept here a little bit later. So I'm just gonna, potentially wait on asking my question, but I do have a follow-up question to that regarding Fields and potentially another rookie quarterback that I know you want to discuss here a little bit later. So I think waiting on that, once we get to that game, I will drop that and see what you kind of get your feedback and thoughts on that side of it for sure. So.
Okay, let's move on to the other Monday night game. This is the Vegas Raiders at the Cleveland Browns. Vegas, this was all over the place. I think it ended at 3 points once it was established that Nick Mullins would be the quarterback. 41.5 total on this one. Looking at my numbers, and let me see if I can actually pull this up here. Because again, I'm going through some of these numbers first thing. This was a game that moved here. So according to my numbers, so the game ended 16-14. The Vegas wins on a last second field goal. I had it 24-14 towards the Raiders, primarily because of the fact that they were just more successful in this game. They had a more successful offense. The running game in particular was just really bad for the Browns. And I think that's maybe something that people are focusing on, Nick Mullins and his inability to move the ball in this game. But the bigger factor for me was that the defense did what it had to do for the Browns, but he couldn't really lean on that running game at all. I have a 20% success rate, negative quarter point EPA per play, which are both in that 10th percentile type of range. I mean, Mullins wasn't great, but he was more in like the 50th percentile for EPA because he got some juice on that 4th down conversion they had at the end. So, the running game just failed them there in this one.
Yeah, definitely. Negative 0.25 EPA for the Browns rushing the football. Raiders actually had a positive EPA on rush attempts, 25 rush attempts. So that's
they had a lot of trouble running the ball earlier this year too. Right, they did pretty well this game.
Yeah, definitely. I think that was kind of where they won it, right? Because they were negative EPA per passing play for the Raiders. And like you said, Derek Carr heavily under pressure. I think they had, 20 plus pressures from the Browns perspective on Derek Carr. So no real success in the passing game to speak of for a whole lot for the Raiders perspective. But this was a game where obviously the Browns deck was kind of stacked against them. Like you said, line moved out to basically +3 for them. They did end up covering that closing spread, and had an opportunity to win, outright. Unfortunately, they didn't. So they are kind of buried here in the playoff race. But yeah, just an ugly carry forward game kind of after that Sunday night debacle. It's just been a little bit of a bloodbath from, an NFL product perspective here in some of these island games.
Yeah. This was painful. This was extremely painful to watch. Mullins just did not look like he could get the ball down the field, but then again, he's throwing to Donovan Peoples-Jones is like his number one target going down the field there. So we didn't have a whole lot to go on. What I want to talk about in this one is, there's a 4th and 5, which of course the hindsight vultures, they had to pass by on that one because it scored. So they have to look for wasn't a dead body there. What I really want to talk about is the last sequence that the Browns had it, because the discourse that I'm seeing, and I'm a little bit plugged into what's going on in the Brownosphere, if that's not really a word, but I'm going to throw it out there. The dog pound, whatever you want to call it, the Twitter dog pound, is that the question, and I think this is a good question. I think it's a question we should consider, is really on that 3rd down. So they had it 3rd and 3. So their sequence on the last drive, 1st and 10, they run the ball, they pick up 2 yards, I believe. 2nd and 8, they run the ball. Chubb has this second effort, which gets them into 3rd and 3. And then on 3rd and 3, right before the 2-minute warning, Vegas calls a couple of timeouts. Before the 2-minute warning, I think it's 2:30, something like that left. You can decide, do you want to risk passing it? Do you want to run the ball, or do you risk not getting down to that 2-minute warning? They run the ball again. They get stuffed. They may even lose half a yard. And they, gets down to the 2-minute warning. They kick it back, and the Raiders, move up the field fairly easily. Honestly, they even got knocked back on a penalty where they would have already been in field goal range much earlier than they were. So the question here a lot of people, the Browns people, are looking back and they're saying, should you have passed the ball on that third down? And my perspective, and I want to, this is what I want to talk about, is that, like, I feel like on those sorts of plays, I like the second down pass call there because of the fact that it's a little bit less maybe expected that you'll do it. But once you got into that 3rd and 3, I don't mind the run call, because in that 4th down situation, I'm looking to go for it there in that 4th down situation. That's what no one is talking about. Our model that we have here, our Walsh model that goes through all the numbers, and Ben Baldwin's model has massive win probability gains going for it. And the thing that people don't really realize is, number one, if you convert, let's say you had, I don't know, a 40-50% chance of converting. If you convert, you win. Most people figure that out, right? There's no timeouts back for the Raiders. But the problem is people associate a failure to convert with a loss. And that's not really the case. I mean, these numbers may be high, but both Baldwin's model and our Walsh numbers had it exactly at a 40% chance of the Browns winning if they fail to convert. That seems a little high to me, but they had 3 timeouts. And most teams in the circumstance that the Raiders are in, what they do is they don't pick up a first down. They run it 3 times. You burn the 3 timeouts. They kick the field goal. They're up by 2. You have the ball back with almost 2 minutes, just needing a field goal yourself to score. So that's the part that people aren't looking at. People are saying, oh, we get it. We convert, we win. But then they associate a failure with a loss, when in reality is punting it away to another team with almost 2 minutes left to go that only needs a field goal. That is more likely a loss than not.
Right, definitely. They never want to take into account that side of it, right? They want to, they basically consider the punt as a win when it really is not even close to win, right? It's still maybe even less than a 50% proposition. So I agree with you. I think, the overall overarching ideas that people want to label with analytics is you just have to be aggressive and you just have to pass all the time, right? And I agree with you on, these 3rd and 3, 3rd and 4, 3rd and 5 situations. Running the ball can be an effective option, especially if you're willing to go for it on 4th down. I don't know why they didn't go for it on 4th and 3 of the Browns from that time. I would have obviously really liked to see it. I do think if they pick up even 1 yard on that 3rd and 3 run from Nick Chubb, they do end up going for it. I could be wrong on that, but I do think that is the way that you want to see your coach and team kind of put teams away. I don't think you want to punt and rely on your team to need a stop, especially when that team only needs a field goal. So I agree with you 100%. That is kind of, where that is definitely where the math leans in that direction. I do think rushing the football with Nick Chubb is probably the right decision on 3rd and 3. It's unfortunate that, he was tackled for no gain in that spot. But if he picks up even 1 yard, I do think they are going for it on 4th and 2 and probably icing the game at that time. So it is a little bit of a frustrating sequence, but I agree with you 100%. So,
I mean, if you think the discourse was bad after the Chargers game, if they would have gone for that and not picked it up,
oh my God,
and then field goal and then not being able to score on the other end, it would have never stopped about how awful of a decision was. So I think, there are a couple of factors for the Browns. It is like 4th and 3. I could see just optically you're like, no, like you're just right away. If you're more than 2, you're saying no, despite the fact that there is still a lot of juice to gain in that 4th and 3. So I can see that. Number 2, just remember, Kevin Stefanski was not there. Right. So we had the special teams coach. Oh, those guys love punting. Look at Bisaccia. Look at Bisaccia on the other end. He's gotten up there. He's like anything more than 4th and like the inch, like a hair thread, anything more than that is off the board for him. So you had the special teams coach for the Browns in there. Who knows what their process was going into that? Like how well does he work? How much if they worked on him as being like, okay, I'm going to integrate these numbers and I'm going to think about it and so forth and so on. Would they have gone with Stefanski? I'm not sure, because I do think it's difficult in that spot. And again, you're the backup head coach. You're the 1 game head coach.
You don't want to lose the
playoffs.
Game, right?
Your playoffs are on the line, right? Like you'll be forever associated in a move where we are saying that you have a less than 50% chance of converting this. You do have a less than 50. So you're most likely going to fail. So you're gonna say yes to a move that you're most likely going to fail. It's a really tough spot for who is it? Pfeiffer? That's the former Vikings guy, I believe.
They all are former Vikings guys, unfortunately.
So tough spot for him. Tough spot for the Browns. I think they're probably in that like 10 to maybe 15% playoff probability, but they also have a tough schedule coming up with the Packers now coming up on Saturday. It's going to be it's going to be tough sledding for them. So my Browns, who I put myself as part of the team last week, now I may have to peel off and then jump onto another bandwagon here. But tough sledding for them, and just an unfortunate group of circumstances. But the Raiders are still alive, so I don't expect a whole much. Like teams you want to play in the playoffs, I think the Raiders would probably be one of those teams I would want to play in the playoffs.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with you 100%. I do think Derek Carr is having a good year, but they're outside of Derek Carr, pretty much a disaster defensively, along the front four. Max Crosby, Pro Bowler, leading the NFL in pressures, those sorts of things. He's definitely a playmaker, but they are probably the perfect team to play in the playoffs if they can get in. The only thing I'm thankful for, they did cash over 6.5 win total. I think they were, after their hot start, obviously it felt like a lock. And then, you look toward the end of their schedule, it looks like they could potentially lose out and finish with 6 wins. So thankfully, the Browns came in heavily influenced by COVID, but they still got over their win total, thankfully. So I guess bettors are happy in that regard, but we'll see. We can move on. Maybe you can be, on the bandwagon of like another AFC North team, like, the Ravens or something. I think would probably be your next best option, right?
Yeah, who knows? I'm not so confident in them either. They're going forward, so we'll see. Let's get into the rest of the games. Let's go back in time here. Let's go way back to Saturday, which seems like a lifetime ago, where the New England Patriots at the Indianapolis Colts. Great atmosphere in this game, by the way. Playoff atmosphere. The Colts, surprisingly to some, including myself, were a 1.5 point favorite. It floated around that 1.5, 2.5 sort of range. It 46 total. The Colts win 27-17. My numbers actually have, again, this has been a very strange week for me. I have many teams that lost looking better according to my adjusting numbers. This is one of them. New England Patriots 18-14, looking a little bit better. And this was a loser for me because I liked either taking the Patriots at +2.5 or a little bit slightly better, maybe the money line at +120 on this one. And what we saw here is a handful of big plays and a Patriots team where, in my opinion, I've always been low on them on a lot of these games. I've been saying a lot of the time that maybe they weren't as good as the final score because they were benefiting off of turnovers. They were benefiting off of big plays. They were benefiting off of some fluky long runs like they did against the Bills. This time it was flipped around on them. They gave up the 67-yard touchdown run to Taylor at the end. The Bobby Okereke interception, which is an amazing play that was made by the Colts. A blocked punt for a touchdown against them. And then Carson Wentz, he only threw 12 passes. 3 of them were turnover-worthy throws. 1 of them was an interception. 2 dropped interceptions. Worst PFF grade of the year for any particular game here. And the last little thing here is that the 4th down decisions, again, the Vultures are going to have to keep circling on this one. And nowhere to go because the Colts were 3 for 3 on 3 4th down and ones, including in their own end with the lead, where they picked them all up on sneaks. And you would expect them to get either between 2 and 3 of those, but you get a little bit of juice, obviously converting all 3 of those, no matter how likely it looks like a certainty with Carson Wentz doing that. He's not going to convert 100% of the time on those short ones. So they had all those things go right for them in a game where they couldn't pass the ball at all. 5 of 12, like I said, Wentz was passing the ball. So for all of those reasons, New England actually ended up looking a little bit better to me in this game.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's not overly surprising when you look back on it. I do think it felt like the Colts were kind of in control of that matchup the entire game, which is kind of how they play, right? I mean, obviously Frank Reich, really good schematic play caller. I know we don't want to talk too much about, play calling and those sorts of decisions, but
it's okay. You can talk about the play call. He
consistently ranks really well in EPA on scripted offensive plays to start the games. You look at it, first quarter, 14-0, and the Colts are kind of leading and they're kind of doing whatever they want. And that thankfully took Carson Wentz out of the game quite a bit, right? Because they were at -0.6 EPA per pass play for the entire game. So defense rushing the football, I don't know if it's necessarily all that sustainable, but I think they kind of beat the Patriots at their own game, and they are just like I would say a little bit better at every single facet than what the Patriots are right now. So I think the Colts are kind of a sneaky team. I know that's, a popular opinion coming out of the Saturday night matchup.
Team you don't want to face. You don't want to face them.
Don't want to face these guys, especially in a cold weather game in the playoffs, right? That's what we're hearing. But I don't know. I think Frank Reich is my coach of the year candidate right now. I know he hasn't necessarily really seriously elevated Carson Wentz to be like a top 5, top 10 quarterback, but they haven't needed that so far, right? They probably will need that at some point in the playoffs. But right now, I think that looking at this team, they are greater than what some of the parts are. I think especially defensively, what did they have, like 18? How many pressures did they have? 21 pressures against Mac Jones. So caused some havoc in the Patriots backfield. So I like the Colts here. I like the Colts at -2.5. I did have them early in the week as pick them. You talked about the Jonathan head-to-head. You talked about the Jonathan Taylor.
How come you always mention the ones where you're against me, where you're winning?
I thought we talked about. No, we didn't talk about this one last week. Yeah, this was one of my favorite spots on Saturday for sure. Unfortunately, Greenland didn't really love it, but I had some early look headlines on it. But yeah, I will never mention any that were opposed.
My adjusted numbers say you're wrong, so maybe you should just.
They don't pay me out though. They do not pay me out.
You can Venmo. You can Venmo me that money. Okay, well, I'm going to talk about Wentz a little bit, and then Mac Jones also a bit. Because perception is coming out in this game. I mean, Wentz was bad. Everyone saw he was bad. Right. And I think there also became this thing of like who Carson Wentz is. And he's had a little bit of a weird season. I mean, there's going to be an ups and downs to everyone's season. Right. And when they started cold to start this season, the first 6 games of the year, Carson Wentz only had 1 turnover-worthy play that entire time. Right. He's had other stretches where he's gone 3-4 weeks with only 1 turnover-worthy play. And then he has a few games here, including this game, where he gets like 3-4 turnover-worthy plays. I think another one was against the slop fest against the 49ers. That was also an island game where he was throwing some ridiculous passes that should have been intercepted. So I think maybe some people see him as being a guy like, I know you say you don't want to face him in the playoffs, but I think there's also the view that you can't get through 4 games and win a Super Bowl with him because of the fact that he's going to give the ball away too much. I mean, in this game, I was, as an analytics guy, I was like, why are they throwing the ball at all? Like, do not let this guy throw the ball. He's trying to give it away. But at the same time, Carson Wentz has had stretches where he doesn't turn the ball over. So I think, that would be my first thing on him. I think he can maybe have like a hot 4-game stretch and not necessarily be this turnover-worthy play machine that we saw here. Number 2 for Mac Jones. I thought it was good that Mac Jones came back, but I also think, it helps in your perception in these spots where your defense gives up nothing. Like it helps your ability to say, oh, he may like if the defense gave up another 2 touchdowns to the Colts, we wouldn't be talking about the comeback and the fact that Mac Jones was able to come back. They still finished the game with 14 points.
Right. Yeah. To go to the Carson Wentz thing, he was bottom 5 in turnover-worthy play percentage heading into the week. Obviously, you said, he had the 3 turnover-worthy plays, but I think it goes back to this mentality of where are we and how are we evaluating these guys? And are we evaluating them, at their floor performance, somewhere in the middle, at the top? And I do think, we're trying to fold in all the different elements to what makes up their entire season and career. And I do think game in and game out, we can probably expect Carson Wentz to take care of the football a lot better than what he did here on Saturday night. So I think that is the reason why I do buy into the Colts as at least being, somewhat of a legitimate contender in what is otherwise a pretty ugly AFC outside of the Kansas City Chiefs. So take.
I mean, they have the 2 other phases, right? They have the running game. And they have the defense. that could potentially all get hot at once.
Which isn't sustainable. And you don't necessarily want to rely on it. That's not how we would rely on it from team building perspective. But I trust Frank Reich. I do buy into them. I do buy into what he's kind of put forth here over the last 2 seasons. So from that perspective, I wouldn't mind seeing them being somewhat successful. And I think they might be my team in the AFC. And if you want to jump ship, Kevin, leave the Cleveland Browns, come over to the Indianapolis Colts. Maybe there's an opening.
I'll think about it. They're in contention. They're in contention. All right. Let's move on to another big game. Let's go Sunday nights. Let's go through all the island games here first. Let's go to Saints at Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The Bucs 12.5 point favorites in this one, 45.5 total. Another thriller here. 9-0 Saints. My adjusted score actually has it 15-14 Tampa Bay. Again, another one of these weird things where I'm seeing it as being closer than it was. So there's a lot of things to discuss here. There were injuries, there were storylines with Brady and not being able to do anything against the Saints. I think the most important thing we need to discuss is from your perspective. Okay, let's say on a scale of 1 to 100, when I laid out last week the series of events that could transpired, leading to Aaron Rodgers MVP and Brady not doing well in this game. So, on a scale from 1 to 100, how amazing was my prediction and then the results of this game? Where do you want to? Let's talk about that first. That's the most important thing here. So, where would you give me?
I would say it was off the charts. I would say it was off the charts. I think we're breaking
analytics. We're breaking analytics. We're going above 100.
You broke the scale. You broke the scale for sure. 110, 120, one of those. Gave 150%, I would say for sure. Yeah. But yeah, you hit the nail on the head. I don't think maybe even in your wildest dreams.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting
both games have played out quite as well as they did, but they definitely played out basically perfection. So
yeah. I mean, congratulations to me. If people don't know, gratuitous self-congratulation is unfortunately a big part of what we do here. But I'd also point out when I'm wrong. It just happens that I'm right a lot more often than I'm wrong. So there's just the way the cookie crumbles there. Okay, but let's talk about why I have the Bucs as being slightly better. I mean, there all these big turnovers, and again, turnovers. Maybe you could say that they are forcing them. They do seem to have some sustainability for the fact that the Saints and the Bucs have faced each other 5 times now since Brady has been with the Bucs last year. They have held him to negative EPA per play 4 of those 5 times. Even in the 5th game, the playoff game, he was muted in his production, and they had a chance to win that game here. Now, another question I have for you is, according to our friend Ben Baldwin and his bot here, he does a good job compiling season-long information, game-by-game information on win probability lost by game. So he has Bruce Arians, since he's been tracking this stuff, which doesn't go all the way back to the beginning of his stats here, I think it says it goes back to 2014, as the most win probability lost on 4th down decisions in the history of from 2014 till now, almost 30% in win probability lost, including the most egregious was a 4th and 1 at the Tampa Bay 41. They were down by 6 points. And they had almost a 9% win probability in there with 12 minutes left in the 4th quarter, and they didn't go for it. But that was just one of many here.
Right.
So Arians is a stone cold boomer. Like, this is boomer.
100%.
He's maybe the worst in the NFL. So my question for you is, when do we start worrying about this? Because they won the Super Bowl. So it's hard to say we're worried about the boomerness, the boomosity of Bruce Arians and that Kangol. I mean, the Kangol is a dead giveaway for a boomer, right? What do we think about? Are we scared? Are we scared about him and his decision making, especially when the margins are going to get a little bit tighter here if Mike Evans, of Chris Godwin's out for the season, Mike Evans is going to miss a few weeks. Antonio Brown could, who knows what? Who knows? Yeah.
Go crazy. Who knows, right?
Who knows what he's going to be doing going forward? He's like, a 50% chance that he ends up being out for one reason or another. Are we concerned about this Bucs team, who most people, including myself, consider the best team in the NFL, at least coming into this game?
Yeah, I mean, I am right. And I do think we have seen kind of the writing on the wall with Bruce Arians and his 4th down decision-making for quite some time. Like you said, Ben Baldwin basically tracked it back to 2014, has shown that he has been the worst in those sorts of situations. And we see it play out quite frequently. And it is a sign of a coach not necessarily putting his team in the best position to win football games. And that's really, all we're asking of. And it does come down to a few crucial decisions throughout the game that we can actually evaluate, right? And I think that's one reason why you don't necessarily like focusing on the play calling situations and actually evaluating that, because it's something that we don't really have probably the perfect window into in order to analyze correctly. So focusing on some of these other things that coaches can potentially do well or drop from a win probability perspective is key. And Bruce Arians hasn't really been all that great in a lot of those scenarios. And, coming to Tampa Bay, he was supposed to be a little bit of this play calling, passing game.
No risk it, no biscuit. What happened to that?
Biscuit. That's
maybe he has like a cholesterol problem or something. And he's just like,
trying to tone it down.
I'm out on the biscuits.
And it is interesting. And you talked about the margins decreasing significantly, right? And I do think that, a team like the Packers are looking like the team to beat in the NFC right now. Last year, in that NFC championship game, it was Matt LaFleur who, had the 4th down decision-making that a lot of people questioned in that situation. And I think that, we could easily see that role kind of reverse this year if the Tampa Bay Buccaneers even make it that far. But I'm questioning, how productive they're going to be heading into the playoffs here, especially with, a triage of wide receivers that all have, significant question marks here at the end of the season. So I'm with you. I've maybe been a little bit lower on Tampa Bay than what you have been, than what the market has been. I have been on the Packers, at least from a betting perspective.
Ben
for
Brown,
the
right
few
again,
weeks
right
here,
again. I'm wrong.
Hey,
Ben's
this
right
is the
again.
gratuitous, got to admit when we're right here. That's for sure. So,
yeah.
But we'll see. I could be wrong on that, but I do think the Packers are the team to beat. I also think the Cowboys, if they can, figure some things out with Dak offensively, I think they are a team that could potentially knock off the Tampa Bay Buccaneers as well. So they're vulnerable. What's your kind of takeaway from this one?
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to swing too far in either direction. So I think there's vulnerability. The biggest factor is the Chris Godwin injury, because that's not, they're not going to get that on board. And I think the thing with Arians, it's just a little confusing when you consider like how good the offense is also, that he's so conservative on these. Like they have that ability to juice a little bit more. But a real reason that I'm not going to get too low on the Bucs right at this particular moment is, number one, I thought that this was, within the realm of possibility that this or something like this can happen. We've seen it happen many times before. It doesn't derail their chances. And number two, they got Panthers, Jets, Panthers for the rest of the season. So
get right games, get right spots, right? That's what they call
it's get perfect. So even if they don't get that number one seed, it's basically like 3 half bye weeks where you don't even have to prepare that much. Maybe you can really be ahead. I don't think the loss of playoff Lenny and the wide receivers is going to be that much of a factor if they're out for a week or two. The other guys, so you have Antonio Brown coming back, so I think they can get through, and they can get through with 3-0 on those games, and it'll put them in a decent position going forward and getting healthy into the playoffs. So again, not going to move up or down too much. Going to move marginally, though. I'm going to move marginally down on them, marginally up on the Packers, but I'm not quite making those equals at this point. And speaking of the Packers, let's talk Packers, Baltimore Ravens. At the Baltimore Ravens, Packers 9-point favorites with Tyler Huntley starting. 45 total. So, okay. Totals are pretty low, but teams did not really show out. But in this game, they did. 31-30, the Green Bay Packers win. My numbers had the Packers being a couple points better, a little bit lower scoring, 27-25. And this is the fourth down decision at the end. Again, the analytics, we're going to have to get into that. Maybe we'll step back a little bit on that. We saw Rodgers had another strong game. He actually graded worse than Tyler Huntley, if you believe that, in this game. But his EPA was extremely strong. And he's been piling up these consecutive victories here. What I thought was interesting for the Ravens, and I know that they were down, so this contributes to it, but they had a 73% drop back rate in this game, which is 7% over expectation with Tyler Huntley. And he was passing the ball pretty well. It wasn't off of the charts, but he was doing pretty well. But yet they were running the ball well also. They had a 67% success rate, which is very, very high versus only 51% passing. So I thought that was a little bit interesting. Maybe they didn't really they had to, catch up that second half. But even in the first half, they were skewed. I think they had a 65% drop back rate in the first half, even when the score was tied. So I thought that was a little bit interesting there. And the question, we have to get into is the fourth down decisions, because I think this is going to take a little bit of time to discuss. Let's look in a vacuum here at that last call. We're going to get into the real mistake, which was the touchdown before. But in that last call, do you have any overarching opinions on whether or not they should have gone for two? If you're in the situation where you're down one with 42 seconds, I believe, on the clock.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I'd like to see it under 30 seconds to really go for two in that situation. Obviously, it incentivizes the Packers quite a bit if they do get the 2-point conversion with 42 seconds left. I just think that's way too much time, probably on the clock for Aaron Rodgers. So, but I can see it from both sides, right? Backup quarterback, really banged up team, maybe didn't necessarily even belong with that opportunity to end the game anyways in a lot of ways, in a lot of situations. So, I don't hate it, but I don't think I would have necessarily gone for it, given mainly the fact that I thought there was too much time left on the clock, especially for a guy like Aaron Rodgers to be able to go down there and kick the field goal and mute the whole situation. And from my own personal perspective, I did have the Packers early on and in a teaser, which I did lose because they did end up going for 2 here. If the Packers would have won by 2 or more, I would have been a lot more happier. So from my perspective and the Ravens' perspective, I do think they probably should have just kicked the extra point here toward the end of the game. But I'm curious your thoughts. Obviously, the decision
Ben Brown's
is to,
first loss of the season.
First loss of the season. It happens.
So condolences on that one. You had a good run. For this last one, I think it was kind of a coin flip. I think there are 4 different. Okay, I was playing around with trying to figure out, how do you figure out whether you should go for it or not? I mean, there's 4 different in these situations where it's really one play is highly determinative of what's going to happen near the end of the game. You can think of it in this way that's not totally opaque. A lot of these things are opaque when it's like, well, you go for it earlier, you're down by 6 with 12 minutes left in the third quarter. What's the win probability for the other team? You can't really think about that solidly. This one, you can really think about 4 different factors in my mind. You can think about, some people say, is your probability of converting higher than your probability of winning in overtime? And if it is, then you go for it. Well, that's not quite right, because there are 2 other factors that come into play. Not only is there the probability you're going to convert, the probability you'll win in overtime. And in this case, I do think their probability of conversion was higher than their chance of winning in overtime. It's probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 45% conversion. Some people had it lower, but I think with a running quarterback, it helps in those situations. And the probability of winning in overtime, I think we had it about 40%, 40%, because of the fact that they were this 9-point underdog. So it's going to be tighter than it would be for a full game because of the randomness that comes in. But those are the 2 things. Now, the 2 other factors, and these are the factors that, like you're saying, how much time is left factors into it, is the probability that if you do make it, if you do get that 2, that the Packers get a field goal on the other end, whether the game is tied or whether they're down 1. And a lot of people's justification for saying they should have gone for it in this circumstance is there's no difference. Like Aaron Rodgers was going to go for the field goal no matter what. I've heard that a lot on the comeback. It's like, well, I don't think that affects how Aaron Rodgers applies the next drive. I'm going to get into, maybe I'm being a little pedantic here, but there's a big difference between, I don't think it has a meaningful effect, I don't think it has a big enough effect, and I don't think it has any effect, because guess what? It has an effect. Okay. If you have the ball with 40 something seconds left and 1 timeout, and you take a 15-yard sack on first down, and then you throw an incompletion and it's 3rd and 25, and you can just run out the clock by taking a knee, guess what? You're going to do things differently if the game's tied than if you're down, down by 1. Like, you're going to still try to score if you're down by 1. Now, again, that's a little bit of an extreme circumstance, but I'm using that to illustrate that there is definitely a difference. Now, the question would be, so that's what this really hinges on, this decision, is how big of a difference is it? How big of a factor is it there? And the more time you have left, the more likely it is that there will be a bigger factor, because that team can really be aggressive and get down the field and score. So that's the one thing that I want to point out here is, I think this is kind of a coin flip, but let's not say it has no effect on what Aaron Rodgers is going to do on the other side. We know it has an effect. We know teams are going to play differently, especially in particular circumstances. Right.
100%. I mean, that was kind of, the idea that I was trying to negotiate with, or, represent, is like, the incentives change so much for the Packers, whether they kick the field goal or whether they kick the extra point or actually get that 2-point conversion. So to say that you can't factor that into the decision-making process is just, a bias that you shouldn't introduce in that sort of situation. So I agree 100%. I do think, so what time period would you need in order to say that they probably should have gone for 2 there?
Yeah, I don't know. It's really tough, because again, it depends a lot on these assumptions here. I mean, with the assumptions that I have here, it's probably closer to 25 seconds. But again, it's not a huge deal. Like, I'm not really disputing this one. I'm not disputing the decision as much as I'm disputing the people saying, well, you have a better chance of winning in making the conversion than winning in overtime. So therefore, that's what you should do. So I'm disputing that a little bit. Now, I think what has to be talked about is my pet thing that has become a thing in the NFL, something that the Ravens have done multiple times in the past, and that is why they did not go for 2 on the touchdown before that, with 4 minutes and change left. And especially if you're going to go for 2 in the end, because it's pretty simple here. I mean, there's a little bit, there's some nuance to it, but the simplicity of it is, if you go for 2 on the last one, if you fail, if you make it, you have a chance to win. If you fail, you lose. You're done. You're 100% going to lose if you fail on that conversion. So if you shift that conversion up, to the touchdown before. If you make it, you kick an extra point on the last one. You're in the same exact position as converting at the end. So there's no downside. You're not losing anything as far as your upside is concerned. If you fail on that one, you have another chance on the final touchdown to go for 2 again and then potentially tie the game. So you're giving yourself that little extra chance that you don't have. You can't go back in time if you fail on the final one and say, you know what, that last touchdown, I'm going to go for 2 on that last one instead of kicking the extra point. And that's where you get the extra win probability on that. It's something that he's done before. Harbaugh even said, I saw a quote of him that he did question himself after that. He doesn't know what happened. I don't know what happened on that one. Maybe he was planning on just going for 2 extra points because he wasn't confident in the offense scoring. And then he changed his mind by the time they get the offense started rolling and they got near the end of the game. I'm not sure. But that was the big mistake. And really, I'll give him credit. I'll tip my cap a little bit that he's admitting that he made a mistake, but he knows this. This is something he's done multiple times before. He has someone in his ear. He has my man, Daniel Stern, I believe, in his ear telling him what he needs to be doing on this one, telling him that it's a pure, easy game. There's no matter how you flip around all the different numbers on here, there's no way to come up with a scenario where if you're a bad offense in converting, you're also a bad team in winning in overtime. So therefore you don't want to go to overtime. So therefore you want to do this. There's really no excuse around that one. And that's the one that I think should be focused on more, while we're calling this last decision an analytics decision when it's a coin flip. The real decision that they made was a coin flip. This was an obvious one that they missed. Right,
definitely. Well, it's 100% it, right? And we're kind of evaluating, like you said, after the fact, we're evaluating like the residual outcome of a situation that we probably shouldn't have even been in, right? If they would have made the correct decision right away, we wouldn't even be having this conversation.
Well, they could have missed the first one. And they would have been going for 2 again. They would have been going for 2 again, though. They would have had that chance.
They would have had the same
on that
opportunity,
play,
right?
Yeah, I mean, again, play calling. We don't get too much, but the play was to go to Mark Andrews, who was dominating that game. But even on that play, Marquise Brown was streaking wide open. He didn't quite go over to a second read again. You don't want to get into it, but he's a rushing quarterback. He would have had a decent chance of converting. So I think that's kind of the big thing that I want to point out from this one. And let's talk again, Rodgers MVP talk here. So he's gone from a 15% win probability last week, plus 600. When your boy said that he looked like a value, now on DraftKings at least, he's plus 125, 42%, 43%-ish win probability. Brady's gone from 60 down to plus 175, so even lower than Rodgers at this point now. Rodgers is first in EPA per play. We didn't really talk much about, again, his continuing success. He's 5th in grading. He's still a little low in grading, which I'm surprised by. Joe Burrow is number 1, by the way. Did you know that?
We'll get into that later.
I'll quibble with that a little bit. And then Brady is now 2nd. So he's off. He's off of his perch where he was way above everyone else in grading. And he's 9th in EPA per play. So I think Brady's saving grace could be compiling against those teams that we saw. Because I think that could be the thing that people aren't thinking about. I think Brady is probably actually a little bit of value at this point. Because I think what people are not thinking about is the fact that when we get to the end of the year and Brady has these like record-breaking type of numbers or very close to record type of numbers, that's going to make a difference in the discussion after just beating down on the Panthers, Jets, and Panthers.
Right. Yeah. Like you said, the end of season schedule for him is obviously going to help quite a bit. Packers a little bit more difficult to finish out the season. But from my angle right now, I do think whoever ends up actually winning the NFC number 1 seed, I do think is actually going to be
okay. So the Packers have the inside track on that. Packers have the inside track on that, but slightly, not as much as what people may think. And I think people might be overplaying a little bit how much the injuries will affect the Bucs because again, they don't. The schedule is looking pretty nice. Okay, let's talk about an important game, but an ugly game. This was actually the Romo Nance game on CBS. The Tennessee Titans at the Pittsburgh Steelers. Pittsburgh finished as a 1-point favorite, 43.5 total. So ugly offensive expectations. And they fulfilled all those expectations and then some with a 19-13 Pittsburgh victory. Again, another one of these games. This does not happen that often that I had these adjusted scores that are that different. And again, I guess I didn't really explain the adjusted scores that much. So maybe I'll just dive into it here. It's looking more at success rate. It's adjusting for turnovers. It's adjusting for special teams, everything more sustainable sort of stuff. 2014 Tennessee is what I have on this one. This was, Tennessee ran for 200 yards, The Steelers, I don't think they had more than 170 total yards. They had like 20 something yards rushing. It was just really, really, really ugly on this one. And the Titans just continued to turn the ball over and over again. They had a ball tipped to the line that was a pick, a strip sack. Now Tannehill's good for like one of those every couple of games.
Right.
2 fumbles after the catch. So 2 catches that were then fumbles. But if you look at the EPA per play, the Steelers were way down in the 7th percentile. They couldn't do anything. And the Titans weren't great, but they could run the ball. They were in the 23rd percentile. So it was just a very, very strange game, a very ugly game. What was your takeaway coming out of this? Because the Steelers are Browns lose, Steelers are alive, Ravens are losing. Are the Steelers gonna make the playoffs?
I cannot get on board that bandwagon whatsoever. I do think,
forget the bandwagon. We're trying to stop it. Can we?
We're trying to stop. Yeah, we can stop it. Right. I think, like you said, according to your adjusted scores, pretty unsustainable play from the Steelers. They did get, high pressure percentage on Ryan Tannehill, but four turnovers, one turnover on downs for the Titans as well. So they were the more productive team offensively, I would say. Just didn't score in the second half, right? So I don't buy into the Steelers here making it anywhere close to the playoffs. I do still think the Titans are probably a hurting team limping into the playoff picture, but it's ugly. I can't live in a world where the Steelers end up winning the AFC North, much less getting in as a wild card team. So whatever we can do to stop that, I am fully on board with you. I'm wondering what do you think we actually need to do to potentially stop that from happening?
I don't know. I mean,
get out on the field and play some.
Tanya Harding. I would say a Tanya Harding situation,
right. But to who?
Big Ben kind of looks like he's already had multiple.
Right.
But the thing was funny about the Steelers too is, they showed a little something in that comeback against the Vikings. People are like, oh, maybe the Steelers offense is back. No, again, small samples, people. Yeah. Small samples. Yeah, that was going down here. Now I'm looking at a New York Times simulator here because we don't have our updated playoff numbers until the week is left. It has a 19% chance for them to make the playoffs. They play the Chiefs, the Browns, and the Ravens. So again, really, really tough schedule. If they can beat the Chiefs next week, it goes up to about 45%. Right. If they can beat the Browns, if they win out, they're in. If they win 2 out of 3, they're still only like a 60-70% chance. So we gotta be rooting for the Browns to get healthy, the Ravens to get healthy, and to win those games, because 20% still way too high for my liking. Right now for the Steelers.
I don't even know if the Ravens or Browns have to be that healthy to beat the Steelers, though. So that's my takeaway on it.
I don't want to risk it.
You don't want to risk it. No risk it, no biscuit. I mean, I've personally been pretty impressed with Tyler Huntley as the backup quarterback for the Ravens. So I'm more worried about everybody else.
There's some takes.
The Ravens.
There's some Huntley takes.
Situation. I
saw a hey, this guy, we're paying this guy nothing. Should we really pay Lamar Jackson, $40 million a year when we can get the same production? So I thought that was one take. Another take was, who would you rather have for the next, I don't know if it was 3-4 years, something like that, Tyler Huntley or Jalen Hurts? That was a take here. Now you might want Tyler Huntley. Look at you. I don't know. I'm saying no to both of those, but the takes are there. So one more good game for Tyler Huntley. And what's interesting? I'm going to go back to the Ravens and the Tyler Huntley thing. Like, having Lamar in a strange way, gives you an additional benefit of being able to get good backup quarterback play.
Right.
Because you can find guys like Tyler Huntley much more easily than you can find someone. Like, if you have Tyler Huntley on another team that runs a pass-centric offense, you're not going to rearrange your entire offense when he comes in. But the fact that you can slide him in and get a higher level of play, in a way, you think that maybe that detracts from Lamar Jackson's value because of the replaceability, but in a way, it actually gives having him as your starter gives him some more value for the fact that you can replace him more easily. Anyway, it's a little bit, I might be galaxy braining that, but it's a little bit of something to think about at least.
No, I think it's really intuitive. And I do think it is a really good point. Cause Tyler Huntley, undrafted quarterback, could get, him off the streets, and the way that he produces, obviously he is the perfect fit as a backup in this Baltimore Ravens offense. So I think, I definitely think you might be onto something. I don't think that's quite galaxy braining. I do think it is a pretty good, synopsis for why, building a team around a guy like Lamar Jackson makes a lot of sense for an analytically forward looking team like the Ravens.
Yep. Okay, let's get into some ads. I've been neglecting our sponsors, our many sponsors. First sponsor would just be PFF. So promo code unexpected, guys. You want all this information that we're talking about here, all the numbers, all the stats, all the green line, betting info, all the fantasy football information. I'm going to have a lot of showdown content coming up here with the playoffs in the front view. Promo code unexpected. Show the bosses that you love the pod. And again, if you want to go out there and if you're like Ben Brown and you can just be undefeated in betting markets,
winners, just pick
then
winners.
DraftKings is your place to go. 'Tis the season of giving, and DraftKings Sportsbook, the official sports betting partner of the NFL, is giving you a Christmas present you won't want to re-gift. That must be new copy here. I don't remember that. New customers can bet just $5 on any of the 4 NFL teams playing on Christmas and win $150 in free bets if they're victorious. Why not win some green and put some extra jingle in your pocket? If the sportsbook is not available in your state, DFS is probably. Millions of dollars available for you with your first deposit. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Promo code PFF. Bet just $5 on any NFL team on Christmas Day. Win $150 in free bets if they're victorious. That's promo code PFF this Christmas at DraftKings Sportsbook, official sports betting partner of the NFL. Must be 21 or older, New Jersey, Indiana, or Pennsylvania only. New customers only. Minimum $5 deposit and $1 wagered. One per customer. Restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. All right. Let's get through some slog here. Panthers at Buffalo Bills. Buffalo 14-point favorite. 43.5 total. So we were not expecting too much from the Panthers here. 31-14, the Buffalo Bills win. I had a little bit more narrow at 22-12, according to my adjusted score here. Interesting and highly consequential injury pregame to Zane Gonzalez. So they had no kicker for the Panthers, and they went 1 for 5 on 4th downs, and they went for on 4th down a lot. So that's why their number, it was a little bit thinner of a margin here. Only a 58 grade for Josh Allen. So Allen did not play extremely well, even though they ended up winning in this. I don't think it was an encouraging performance. It was definitely a worse performance, I believe, than the 17-point differential that they had there. But I don't know if I'm really concerned either way for the Bills going forward. They needed this W in the worst way with the Patriots coming up. Do we care at all about the results of this game?
I don't. I still think, heading into this game, if you thought Josh Allen had, slightly regressed in the 2021 season, the Bills maybe not playing quite as well as expected offensively, I think you still hold on to that. If you didn't buy into that, I definitely think there might be some things to build off of, but we're going to find a lot more out about the Bills here in week 16 than what we got from the Panthers in week 15. So my only takeaway is I think Carolina might be time to rebuild. I think it might be time to move on from Matt Rule as well, and see what happens.
They're rebuilding just in 2020. Yeah, it's looking ugly there. Sam Darnold. I'm predicting a Sam Darnold sighting sometime before the end of the year. That's what you have to look forward to.
Doesn't it feel like years ago when people were like trying to build up Sam Darnold as being this like revelation at quarterback for the Carolina Panthers through like the first 2 or 3 weeks of the season? That
Sam Darnold's done that a few times
already.
He would have he would start to get hot in like week 14 every year, and people would be like, "Oh, next year Sam Darnold." This is it. So he flipped it this time, and he gave us the goodness at the beginning of the year, and then fell on his face afterwards. Okay, so let's go to the Atlanta Falcons at the San Francisco 49ers. Your Atlanta Falcons. You love the Falcons.
I do. This was a loss for me. I'll admit it right away. That's all I want to say.
9-point favorites were the 49ers, 47.5 total, 31-13 San Francisco. And my adjusted score had it exactly the same point differential, but a little bit higher for both teams, 35-17. I mean, it was a dominating performance. The 49ers, there was some bad stuff for the Falcons on not being able to convert on 4th downs, but then they also got a fumble right on the opening kickoff. It was the most impactful play of the game. The Falcons are done. The Falcons are done.
Right.
Thank you, Lord. The Falcons are done because they were truly a team that everyone wanted to play in the playoffs. And I want to turn this into this game review, unless you can take another direction. If you want to mourn for the Falcons, you can do that. But I want to turn this into Jimmy Garoppolo appreciation time here because I've been on this Jimmy train. Again, just sorry for anyone who wants to skip forward for 30 seconds. Gratuitous self-congratulation is on the lookout here. This offseason, I even said, you know what? This looks a little bit like a Chiefs 2017 situation where you have a good team. You have a team that's playoff caliber. You have a quarterback who, in my opinion, I think like he's even a little bit better than Alex Smith. He's kind of like a tier above Alex Smith. You have weapons, right? You're going to have Ayuk coming back, Deebo Samuel, George Kittle. Like you have a team that can win. And if your team is winning, and if your team is in playoff contention, you're not necessarily going to turn it over to the rookie quarterback, especially the rookie quarterback who did not play the prior year, who doesn't have a whole lot of experience, and so on and so forth. I was told that was ridiculous. I was told that they were going to trade. No matter what they were posturing, they were going to get rid of. They would have to straight up cut him. I don't think they can even trade him. Right. They're going to trade Jimmy Garoppolo before the season happened. Everything else. Well, things have played out this way. I don't think there's any chance that they're going to flip over to to Trey Lance. They're not even using him on a specialized play basis. And again, Jimmy keeps on moving up. 90 grade on this play. 0.5 EPA per play, 0 sacks, 0 turnover-worthy plays, 10.2 yards per attempt, 83% adjusted completion percentage if you add back in his drops on the adjustment. So
I have it higher than that even, actually. Yeah, he was 87% adjusted completion percentage.
Yeah. You might have had it higher. I take out some of the no plays on here. But again, even when I've been defending him in the Twitter sphere, I have people coming back to me like, oh, Nick Mullins and CJ Beathard were pretty good too. And Jimmy has been either second or third, depending upon how you look at it, in EPA per play behind Mahomes and Breeze since 2017. Mullins and Beathard, when they were both on the 49ers, were basically like 29th, 46, right around 0 the entire time. And I agree, they're not great quarterbacks, but still, there's this whole thing of Jimmy and wanting to replace Jimmy. And the Jimmy haters out there, in my opinion, people look at this sometimes as being evidence that if he's doing this well, imagine if you replace him with someone else. But at the same time, for me, if you're getting quarterback play only one notch below Patrick Mahomes, don't you start to think that's a really high bar to get to no matter who you're putting in there at quarterback? I mean, I don't think Shanahan is a magician. And I think the things that Jimmy does, things that I've mentioned on this pod, things that Shanahan actually backed up in his press conference, was he said he's really, really good at throwing into those tight windows. It leads to some ugly interceptions that people want to kill him for sometimes, but it also helps with yak and it helps convert those third downs. So for me, it's just a little bit of a Jimmy appreciation hour. And we're going to have to start having the conversation because this is maybe like a top 5 borderline type of team here for the 49ers. We're going to start to have the conversation if they can make a little bit of run in the playoffs of, do they trade away Jimmy Garoppolo in the offseason when you still have him under contract? We don't know what's going on with Trey Lance, but it's not encouraging that he hasn't, sniffed the field other than the 1 week where Jimmy was injured and he didn't look very good when he was out there.
Right. Yeah, definitely. They were trying to get him involved early with some of those goal line packaging and stuff like that. It sounds like they didn't necessarily want him to be focused on that during practice time throughout the week. So maybe wanted to get him in the more traditional offense. So that's why we've maybe not seen him whatsoever, but those weren't really all that successful. But yeah, Jimmy Garoppolo has by far exceeded expectations, not only in this game, but in 2021 overall. So do you think, you said the 49ers top 5 team in the NFL, obviously they're, on the doorstep.
They're close. I don't know if they're quite there. Top seven.
Can you, and you talked about tiers with Jimmy Garoppolo. Can you win a Super Bowl with Jimmy Garoppolo at quarterback?
I mean, you could definitely win a Super Bowl with Jimmy Garoppolo at quarterback. Right. The question, you can win a Super Bowl with Eli Manning at quarterback. Twice. Yeah. You can win a Super Bowl with Trent Dilfer at quarterback. You can win a Super Bowl with a lot of different guys at quarterback. So I think everyone is so focused on that playoff run where they were able to hide him, and people focus on him being hidden in those games against the Vikings and the Packers, but those are complete blowouts. I don't think it's not like they're, and you could say they hit him a little bit more against the Chiefs. Maybe they did, but there are a couple of plays there. I know he missed Emmanuel Sanders on a big play. Maybe Emmanuel Sanders, get a little up there in the age model there. He needs to maybe speed up a little bit on that one too. A couple plays go a different direction. They win the Super Bowl and the whole narrative is flipped around, in my opinion, on Jimmy Garoppolo. So as long as he's giving you that type of play, I think they definitely can get there Could he produce second behind Patrick Mahomes EPA per play if they were running a spread pass the ball around offense? Like, no, of course not. He's not getting there, but he can execute to what they're doing. So I think he's plenty good enough to win a Super Bowl. Like I said, I think Alex Smith is in a tier below what Jimmy can do. And the move to say we cannot win with Alex Smith, no matter how good some of our regular season performance may be, we cannot win with Alex Smith, I think makes sense. To say we're going to trade away 3 first-round picks to get an unknown that we can't win with Jimmy Garoppolo, to me, did not quite meet the bar. If they wanted to draft another quarterback in the first round or, move up for Justin Fields or do something like that, they would have been right in that range. That's fine. But the move that they made for me was too much considering what Jimmy has been able to give them in performance, which again, in my opinion, if you don't even have to surround him with perfect defense and perfect running game, is enough to win games.
Right. And we've seen that play out. Here. Right. So it'll be interesting. I think that is kind of sounding like the team that you might be switching.
Maybe I will, but then I'm kind of a Shanahan hater. Well, that's my other factor on this. I feel like the Shanastans out there are really like they have to have someone to blame. So Jimmy becomes the guy that they can toss on. I mean, again, QB wins. You don't want to get into it too much, but you especially don't want to get into it when comparing for different teams. But this team, I should pull up. I don't have the exact numbers here, but there's something like 29-13 with Garoppolo. And 12-25 with everyone else since 2017. So it's on the same team. So the QB wins thing works a little bit better there. He's had some injury problems, and I know they were concerned about that, and that was part of the draft pick. But I don't think he's like necessarily plays the style of an injury-prone type of guy. I think it may have been bad luck more than anything else. Okay, so that's my Jimmy Garoppolo appreciation hour. I'll expect my check in the mail. Jimmy's making some good money there.
He is.
Okay, let's talk. This is another one we could probably get through pretty quickly. Texans at Jacksonville Jaguars. Jacksonville 5.5-point favorites against anyone. Was crazy.
Absurd.
Moved up multiple points. The Urban Meyer effect. Maybe now we have evidence to say Urban Meyer, they missed Urban Meyer, right?
Minus 2.5. Yeah.
That was a good coach. So they lose 30-16. I actually, again, this is another one of these games. I have so many of these games this week where I have Jacksonville being a slightly better team because Houston benefited from a kick return touchdown. It benefited from 2 long Brandon Cooks touchdowns. And the Jaguars had better numbers generally across the board. They just were not able to convert on those. And those were 2 big plays that pushed Houston ahead. Do you have anything to say about the game? Did you watch this game? Did you?
I can safely say I did not watch this game. I was maybe going to plan on watching it later on.
You didn't want to see Brandon Cooks stand,
but
you didn't want to see a rookie battle where you have this like up and coming, maybe he'll continue to start next year quarterback. And then you had the generational talent, of course, Davis Mills and the up and coming, maybe should we stick with them or should we have stuck with Minshew, Trevor Lawrence in this game?
Yeah, I did not see it. Unfortunately, Brandon Cooks continues to deliver from a fantasy perspective, which is something you love to see. But my main takeaway is I think if you ever say, the betting market is rational, you can always look back at this game with the Jaguars basically moving out from 3 to 5.5 after caning Urban Meyer and then kind of getting boat raced a little bit here on Sunday. I don't know. I didn't watch it, so I do agree probably a little bit with your synopsis. But the fact that the spread moved so much after the Urban Meyer news, I think was just a reaction to noise or fluff or something else that just is makes it not necessarily all that rational. So
this Bevel, God, he had this sequence at pretty early in the game where they had it 3rd and 10 on the 11-yard line. The Jaguars had it. They run the ball 3rd and 10 on the 11-yard line. They pick up 7 yards. They start to look like they're going to go for it. They call a timeout. Then they kick a field goal. And then on the next, and this is where they're already down 7-0. And then on the next kickoff, they give up the kick return touchdown and they're down 14-3. So it's like, if you're running the ball on 3rd and 10 from the 11-yard line, like, what's your threshold for going for it there? Right. 7 yards is not enough. Like, what are you hoping for? Are you hoping to convert that? Like, I don't even mind the run necessarily that much as like a trick. Like, okay, we're going to get, maybe 6-7 yards and then go for it on the next play. But then they didn't even do it. And Trevor Lawrence, the most interesting thing about what's going on with him is, okay, since week 9. So we're on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 weeks, 1 touchdown pass in the last 7 weeks for Trevor Lawrence. 1 touchdown pass. Now, he hasn't been turning the ball over a lot. He only has 5 interceptions, 4 of them in one game last week against the Titans. But yeah, not looking so hot.
That was a miss by me too. You want me to point out my losses? I did have Trevor Lawrence over 1.5 passing touchdowns. I figured he had to be due, right? But just based on that stat that you said. But that did not.
Oh, the Doofer factor. Yeah.
The Doofer factor. The
big part of the analytical work. If you want to get more of that great analytical work from Ben Brown, PFF.com, promo code unexpected.
He's due.
Okay, let's talk about analytical maven, analytical coach of the year, Dan Campbell. Let's talk about Dan Campbell, DC here. Arizona at Detroit Lions. Arizona 12.5 point favorite, 48 total. Detroit dominates 30-12.
Right.
My adjusted score 34-19. So a little bit, actually a little bit more narrow, but about the same. Best bet here for me, I had Detroit plus the 12.5. And I should have had a money line. I should have gone money line.
Sprinkle that money line, man. You got to sprinkle.
So Goff torched them. He only 45% pass rate, and the pass rates have been very low for the Lions since DC has taken over the play calling duties there. But 90th percentile efficiency here. And let's talk about DC here, because I'm going to list off for you. Again, I'm just taking off of Ben Baldwin's work. I like that he does a lot of work, even though this is not even his full-time job. And then I can just take off of what he's done here. So I'm going to name for you the top 6 coaches, okay, that in the NFL, as far as how often they are going for it when they should, when they have at least a 1% win probability gain in games where it's not completely decided. So the top 6 are Brandon Staley, Kevin Stefanski, Cliff Kingsbury. We'll talk about him in a second in this one, because he went back to fake sharp Cliff Kingsbury here. Matt LaFleur, Robert Saleh, and in the middle of these guys, Dan Campbell. Dan Campbell and the Lions. I canceled Dan Campbell because he didn't get the go for 2 down 8 thing in the offseason, but I did uncancel him quickly because he's listening. He's listening to what's going on here. They actually didn't end up trying it because they got a false start, but he was trying to go for it up 10 points on his own side of the field in this game. On a 4th and 2 on his own side of the field. They were trying to go for it. But let's talk about Kingsbury's decisions real quickly here, because I'm trying to figure out who's going to be my donkey of the week, whether it's Bruce Arians, who had the worst performance, as we mentioned, but he's kind of like a donkey every week.
Right. You can't just give it to him for one particular
Kingsbury,
week.
I'm disappointed in, because he's been a guy who's doing the right thing. And then what I'm disappointed more than anything is bad process and not having a consistency to what you're doing, because they go for it at 4th and 3 down 10 near the goal line. And then on 4th and 3 down 17 on the 11-yard line. So again, near the goal line, they kick a field goal later.
Right.
And the later decision was clearly more valuable because you were down more points. So it's like, if you have some consistency in your decision-making, there is a 0% chance you should be going for it on 4th and 3 down 10 right near the goal line, but you shouldn't be going for it 4th and 3 down 17 later in the game. More time has gone by. Your win probability has gone down. The upside that you're going to get from that decision. What's going on? Are we going to have to potentially cancel Cliff Kingsbury here, and DeAndre Hopkins gone, everything else? What are we thinking about these Cardinals? Because again, I don't like to push the panic button, but it's one thing to lose to a scrappy Lions team. It's another thing to get completely dominated.
Yeah, completely blown out, right? And I do think there is an interesting takeaway, because, we've talked about it in other spots and other podcasts and those sorts of things, where Arizona Cardinals were kind of the trendy team to have as like the number 1 overall team in the NFL for a while, especially when
power rankings. They were loving that.
But they have not looked the part really since Kyler Murray's gotten back. I would say in a lot of ways, I guess, his first came back, they were okay. But Cliff Kingsbury goes back to the fact, like you said, he's just not consistent in his decision-making. He has been pretty good so far here in 2021, but the framework that he had last year is nerve-wracking, right? And there are a team that is really banged up due to injury. I am concerned about them. I am concerned about, their status in the playoffs. I don't think they're necessarily I think they're like probably tier 2.5 here in the NFC playoff picture right now is kind of where I've had them ranked or stacked up basically. But It's tough. It's tough to trust Cliff Kingsbury when all the lights are shining brightest, when he actually has to make some of those tough decisions and calls. And it looks like in a lot of situations, he's just trying to, save face. And I don't really think that's what I would want from a coach. And I do think it's the exact opposite of what Dan Campbell has brought to this Detroit Lions team. I would like to see Dan Campbell kind of coaching a team that is expected to win and kind of see a little bit of a role reversal and kind of see how he approaches that. Because I do think in some of his decision-making, he's going to be, overly aggressive in a lot of ways, kind of like Brandon Staley is. But so far for what he's brought from 2021 from the Detroit Lions, he has been way, way better than expected. And I'm so glad that you uncanceled him to start the season, because that would have been one of the biggest mistakes.
Egregious mistake on my part. And I feel like Dan Campbell's one of these guys where I feel like he's maybe a floor raiser as a coach, but not necessarily like a ceiling type of guy. Like he can get more than you would expect out of a troubling team. That's why he was a good fit for this rebuilding franchise. But I don't know if he's necessarily going to tune a top 5 team into being the best team in the NFL. So Cardinals, they're going to get in to the playoffs still, no matter what, but the bye week is basically dead. So they're really just playing for home field and not to lose their home field here. But the Cardinals have this is when the potential for reeling, right? This is a potential for a tailspin because they have the Colts and there's some big holes they've been giving up in recent games here running the ball. The Colts at the Cowboys and the Seahawks. The Seahawks, no matter how poorly they're doing, they'll probably be frisky, at least to potentially win something here. So, like again, I said they're going to get in no matter what, but they could end up with a road game here after looking like the team that was going to be the number 1 seed for most of the season. So it's be important for them to turn that around going forward. And for the Lions, they're working their way out of the number 1 pick. But this, I don't think it really matters that much. Which it's a coin flip probably between which one of these edge rushers you're going to get near the top of the draft, presuming that you're not going to take a quarterback in that range. Right.
Definitely. I mean, it's 1 and 2 basically looking like the top defensive ends in the country. And choosing between those two. I mean, in a lot of ways, that feels like a coin flip as well. One could easily work out, one could easily not. So, I think, building a little bit of, showing what the Lions are actually capable of, what, some things to build off of for next season. I do think it's kind of key.
Get some off-season momentum.
Yeah,
some momentum.
I mean, the defensively, they, performed really well, had a few, really big interceptions here in this matchup. So,
some really nice plays. Yeah.
Really nice plays. So,
yeah. Okay. So let's move on to Jets Dolphins. Did not watch a lot of this one. Miami, 10.5 point favorites at home, 42 point total. 31-24 Dolphins, 30-21 Dolphins is what I have as my adjusted score. So a little bit even more wide here. Okay. This was a weird one because it was obviously like the turnovers early for Tua.
Yeah, the really bad
looking. Wilson was looking functional as he has in very limited stretches here. And the Dolphins now, with this run that they've been on, I still don't think they have a good chance of getting into the playoffs, but they maybe have like a 5-10% chance of potentially getting in here. They have a little bit of a tough schedule. It's weird how schedule dependent they've been, because I remember seeing them 6-7 games into the season. They had the toughest schedule in the NFL so far that season. They were disappointing. They were going to have the easiest schedule in the NFL going forward. They've been, beating down on some really poor competition, and now it's going to flip back to Saints, Titans, Patriots the rest of the season. So, they probably got to almost win out or at least win 2 out of 3 of those to have a chance of getting in. I don't know if I quite see it for them. Is there anything else to think about for the Dolphins? I mean, no Jalen Waddle. So I wonder if that also affected Tua a little bit, how well that pairing has worked as far as yards after catch and RPOs and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, definitely. I do think Jalen Waddle is a pretty significant loss for the Dolphins offense, but it's tough, right? I do think, Tua kind of fits in this boat of how are we evaluating young quarterbacks? What is like the threshold that we need to really understand if a guy's actually going to be good in the NFL or not? I don't know if we've reached that point with Tua or not. I think we are definitely getting very close, but I'm wondering kind of your thoughts, at least like when are you, maybe canceling isn't the right word, but when's the time where you can actually, kind of bury one of these young signal callers and potentially say like, he's just not going to be good in the NFL? Or, on the flip side, how early can you possibly know if a guy's actually going to be a legitimate starter and potential, Super Bowl contender at the quarterback position throughout the course of his career. How early on do you think you kind of need, or how many snaps do you need to see before you can kind of start some of those evaluation processes?
Yeah. This hints at why I originally wrote an article about liking the Jalen Hurts pick. And I think the biggest mistake teams have is putting quarterbacks in this binary designation of we know we have the guy or we don't know we have the guy.
Right.
And the reality is the people who belong in the 100% we know we have the guy is maybe 4 or 5 young quarterbacks that we're talking about out there. And everyone else is at varying degrees of we don't know. So those varying degrees mean you should take strategic chances. Like if they're near the top of that, we don't know, but you still think you probably know, still take strategic shots, maybe at a Jalen Hurts in the second round, or at someone else in the third round, or maybe even someone else in the late first round, if you want to go for that. And as you move further and further down, then you get more and more pressing towards needing to really address that situation. So I think this is the case maybe for Tua. I was advocating them to at least take a hard look at drafting a quarterback at number 3 when they originally had the number 3 pick before trading back there. Not because I think Tua is a bust, but because he wasn't very good as a rookie. He shows some traits as far as arm strength and, ability to throw the ball down the field. He's not particularly athletic, even though you might think that he runs the ball, that you don't necessarily have a lot of upside from the traits perspective there. And I don't want to rest too much on traits, but he also did not look good as a rookie. Right. Fitzpatrick was much better. So I was willing for them to maybe think about taking a shot right there. So I think even after this season, I would still put him in the larger bucket of we don't know what we have. I would move him a little bit further down of maybe we don't need to, sell the farm to go and get his replacement. But again, if you're going to take a strategic shot at someone else, I would be fine doing that. The Deshaun Watson sweepstakes, all that sort of stuff that we'll get into in the offseason. But that's where I would have him. And on the flip side of it, let's talk about Zach Wilson, because this is another guy that we're going to have to talk about in this regard. And I was really hoping he would play well. I was rooting for the.
He started too.
Right. He started. I know he started well. And so he's been awful. But I think what's interesting about him is, and I'm going to bring up an article from a friend of the pod, Ben Solak over at The Ringer, where he wrote an article about Zach Wilson, where he kind of buried Zach Wilson a little bit. It's, there's a little bit more nuance than that, but I felt like the skew was very negative. And even if you just look at like some of the words that were used on there, instead of saying that Fields and Lawrence's tape was better, he would say their tape was remarkably better. I mean, Fields and Lawrence stink too. So it's kind of hard for me to throw remarkable behind anything they're doing. It's funny. You showed a clip from Lawrence throwing a touchdown. It's like, dude, he's thrown 1 touchdown in the past 8 weeks.
This was the only clip. This was the only
clip, so that's what's bringing it up. And I think also he mentioned the statistical case against Wilson, saying he's worse in every category. Yeah, but if one guy's like 33rd out of 34 or 35, and the other guys are 31st and 32nd, I don't think that's like you're
that ranking doesn't matter a whole lot.
Yeah, I'm not really thinking that ranking matters a bit. So I'm kind of being a hater a little bit here, as is
you're known to be once in a while.
Yeah, known once in a while, and hoping that Wilson will do better, because you seem to have this feeling that people want him almost to be worse than he is. So I do think there are some questions about him now. Could you turn around and say we're going to draft someone else this season?
Right.
It doesn't seem like a good draft to do it, but if they had the opportunity, I'd think about it. The one thing Wilson does have for me is he does have traits. I think there were still a few plays where you saw him. He can escape well. He's more athletic than someone like Tua. He's more athletic than Sam Darnold. He has a better arm than Sam Darnold. My thing with Sam Darnold was he played like he had a better arm and was more athletic than he was. Kind of like how Baker Mayfield plays like he's more athletic than he is sometimes. Where I think Wilson really is that athletic and really does have that good of an arm. He just hasn't been able to put anything together this season. Would you be writing off Wilson at this point?
No, I have not entirely, but I also think part of that is the fact that Eric Eager and some other people and things that I looked at in the offseason, I was probably higher on Zach Wilson, even then, like his number 2 draft rank. And I do think, some of our college to pro projections and some other things were really high on Wilson. So just kind of resting on my priors a little bit, I'm definitely not ready to write him off, although he has shown, essentially nothing in the NFL so far. But like you said, we haven't really seen any rookie quarterback show all that much up, right? So I'm not necessarily going to write all of them off this year. I'm kind of going to wait and see and evaluate it. But I do think, like you said, if it was a stronger quarterback class in 2022, I do think there's a significant question on if the Jets should use their top pick on a quarterback. Now, it doesn't really look like there's a guy worth doing that highly in the draft, but I definitely think the consideration should definitely be there if they're going to like trade down or something to maybe get some more competition, because I don't think you can ever have, enough talent at the quarterback position, especially with guys that fit your scheme really well. So that's kind of my takeaway.
One thing I'll say about priors is I also think there's probably a little bit of humility that people should have with some of these priors. I think the thing is, when we look at the guys who like Justin Fields and didn't like Zach Wilson coming out, and now they analyze the evidence, their prior is Zach Wilson is worse than Justin Fields is their prior. Now, even if our personal prior could go either direction, I think you cannot ignore, maybe you can discount, but you cannot ignore the fact that the Jets, Zach Wilson was taken by the first team who could take him, who could not take Trevor Lawrence. Right. So that's where he was. I don't know. We don't know for certain if other teams were willing to go up and get him in that position or not, but the Jets were not willing to move off of that for certain. Whereas, with the Dolphins moved off of the number 3 pick. So if you look at the teams that were not willing to take, if we put in the same bucket, not willing to take Justin Fields, but willing to take Trevor Lawrence, the same bucket that Zach Wilson is. So the Jaguars don't fit in that, but we have the Jets, we have the 49ers, we have the Falcons, we have the Bengals, we have the Dolphins, the Detroit Lions, the Carolina Panthers, the Denver Broncos, the Philadelphia Eagles, and then we get to the Chicago Bears, where they traded up into that spot. Other teams could have traded up into that spot too. Presumably, the Patriots could have traded up in that spot if they really wanted to. Presumably, the Raiders could have traded up to that spot if they really wanted to. Presumably, the Washington football team could have gotten up into that spot if they really wanted to. The Giants obviously could have been in that spot if they really wanted to, because they're the ones who had traded out. And when you consider all of that, I don't think you just can't ignore that as part of your analysis. You can't just hold their tape and their grades and their stats side by side and say, we're going to just view these equally in our evaluation.
Right. 100%. I mean, that is basically,
even if you think the NFL is full of idiots, which full of idiots. No, but there's got to be someone smart in all those organizations that I just ran through who believed that Fields was not worth drafting at that point. So
priors matter. That's all I can.
Priors matter. Okay, so let's get into a couple more games here. We got 2 more games left, but before we do, last sponsor of the day, Western and Southern. Want the chance to win an ultimate game day feast, whether it's football success or financial savvy? Winning starts with us asking questions. Would you like to know what's behind the scenes with Al on Sunday Night Football? How about a need to know for your financial future? Western and Southern is teaming up with PFF's very own Chris Collinsworth to share insights that can help put you ahead on both your fantasy and financial scoreboards. Every submission earns you a chance to win the ultimate feast to celebrate football's favorite Sunday. We'll cover your catering up to $2,500. Coordinate your order from a restaurant near you and have it delivered on February 13th, 2022. And don't forget to check out the Chris Collinsworth podcast and Western and Southern's Instagram for answers to the best questions each week. Submit your questions at westernsouthern.com/askchris. One more time, that's westernsouthern.com/askchris. And if you're watching this on YouTube, check out the link in the description below. Remember, with Western and Southern, you can rest assured on game day. Okay, last couple ones to get through here. Dallas. This will be an interesting one, actually. Dallas at New York Giants. Dallas 11.5-point favorites. We had the Fighting Glennons on the other side, and then the Froms make an appearance. 43.5 total, 21-6 Dallas. 25-13, a little bit more narrow was my adjusted score. So the Dallas is basically like the Chiefs maybe were a while ago. They're just a defensive team now. The offense has gone away, and they're a defensive team. Just nothing explosive for the Cowboys. Dak dropped back 40 times, and they had 217 yards on those 40 dropbacks. What are we thinking? Because let's worry about the Cowboys first. Looks like Daniel Jones is going to be shut down for the year. So props to Evan Silva, who mentioned on the Establish the Run podcast that who was it? John Mara, the owner of the Giants, his carpenter was supposedly John Morris Carpenter said Daniel Jones was out for the rest of the season multiple weeks ago. He said he wasn't going to come back. That was what he, not that it matters for any practical purpose, but I thought that was a little funny storyline that Evan Silva with this inside information that from John Morris Carpenter. But now Jones is officially gone. What's his name? Gettleman's gone. Joe Judge, I guess, is going to survive.
Well, he's going to be gone.
He's going to be gone.
I was going to say, I'm not. Okay.
He's not officially gone, but he's dead man walking.
He's on his way out.
He's dead man walking at this point. So Judge, I guess, is going to survive. I don't know much to say about the Giants other than the fact that Devontae Booker averaged half an EPA per design run and Saquon Barkley averaged negative 0.3 EPA per design run. Booker had a 50% success rate to Saquon's 25. So you can't tell the difference between the two. The announcers can't tell the difference between the two. That's a troubling
they're one big like rush play basically was like on the fourth and a couple inches or something like that. Sweep out to the left, Devontae Booker, and that was like their one big.
Yeah, and the announcers were like, Saquon Barkley takes off. No. It's like, no, sorry.
Sorry, buddy.
Fooled you. Let's talk about Dallas, though.
Right.
Dallas actually moved up in the standings relative to some others, but I don't like this defense. I don't like this defensive.
You don't like the defense?
I mean, I like that they're playing well, but I don't like them being a defensive team. I mean, I especially don't like them being a defensive team. RIP to my fantasy team in the first week of the playoffs with had a Dak, Cooper, and CeeDee Lamb there. I don't like this team, especially after Dak was looking so good offensively to start the season.
Yeah, so this is my takeaway. Third quarter, basically, Cowboys had the ball. 3rd and 7, I think they were basically in the red zone or near the red zone. They ended up rushing the football to get it to like 4th and 5 or something like that. In that situation, you'd expect after the rush attempt that they probably would have gone for it on 4th down. They ended up settling for a field goal. The next drive, they get down there, same area. It's 3rd and 3, and they end up dropping back to pass. Dak Prescott gets sacked. Loses like 16 yards, 14 yards or something like that. They end up kicking the field goal again. I just think some of like that decision-making, especially on 3rd down, setting up those 4th down to go for it opportunities with Mike McCarthy hasn't been great. I do think they would have put up, quite a few more points if they would have had better options in the red zone specifically. But I think they decided, we can rely on some field goals. We can rely on our defense to beat a Mike Glennon yet led New York Giants team that has no business playing whatsoever with us. So I would like to see them, be a little bit more aggressive in those situations. I think they hopefully will be. We have seen Mike McCarthy do that previously, so maybe this is just like an outlier performance from his perspective. But I do think they left a lot of points on the board, specifically offensively. So I think maybe they aren't as bad in that category as they are. So I think, seeing the fact that they were really strong defensively, I also think helps them long term. So I do think they are still one of the better teams in the NFC playoff picture. I would have them probably as, my 3rd or 4th best team here. And I do think that they are definitely capable of beating anybody on the path to the Super Bowl right now.
Yeah, I think 4th is probably pretty uncontroversial, maybe even above the Cardinals now.
Yeah, I would have them above the Cardinals. Yeah.
It slightly is not as controversial as it would have been. So I can give you that. It's funny you mentioned Mike McCarthy in the offense struggling. I'm thinking a lot about Kellen Moore recently because this is a golden boy. He was looking like he and Joe Brady have similar kind of declines here now. And then you have names like Byron Leftwich moving up the pecking order for potential head coaching guys. Whereas I feel like Moore was one of those guys, but maybe it won't matter that much if they're struggling here. Maybe Moore will still be on the cusp of potentially getting a job this offseason, but the shine is definitely off a bit on that offense. They need to turn around here for me to feel a little more confident, at least. Okay. Last game of the day, Cincinnati Bengals at Denver Broncos. Denver 3-point favorites. You could get it at. It was at 2.5 most of the time. 44 total, 15-10 Cincinnati. I actually have it 21-12 Denver. So again, one of these weird ones that's flipped around in the other direction. And I had a best bet though for Cincinnati +3 or +130 on the money line. So I'll cash that. And you like that also.
I love that. That was my favorite play, I think, of the weekend for sure, was Cincinnati money line. So
this is a weird game.
Like the over. I like the over in this game though too. So I can't only sing my praises basically right now.
Yeah. So that was didn't help when Drew Lock came in, although Lock did not completely poop himself out there. So I'll give him some credit there. This is a weird game where the special teams was actually really good for the Bengals. They were 3 for 3 on field goals. They had a 58-yarder and almost a 6-point swing at the end of the first half. They made a 53-yarder, and the punts, believe it or not, team punt here. They had a 50-yard net on their 7 punts, and they punted 3 different times from their own like 35, 34, and 33, like right on their own side of the field, that ended up being downed or going out of bounds inside the 10-yard line for the opponent. So it's such a weird thing to point out here. It's normally not this is the reason why my adjusted score is different than the real score, is that the Bengals got actually a lot of points off of good special teams play in this one. Just low success rate. They're just not being successful again. So again, they had the 56-yard touchdown to Tyler Boyd, and that helped a lot. And the thing with Burrow is, we talked about Burrow. He moved up. You said you want to talk about Burrow. So we talk about, he's moved up to number 1 in our grading. Yet the thing with him, the thing that I've had issues with, the thing that we do not grade that harshly on, quite honestly, is the sacks, and whether it's on him, whether it's on the offensive line, but still 3 more sacks here on only 29 dropbacks. So he is second in the NFL behind only Justin Fields in the percentage of his sack rate.
Dropbacks, yeah.
So let's talk about Burrow. What do we think about him? What do we think about the fact that he's number 1 in our grading right now?
Yeah, so it is PFF passing grade, like you said. The sacks are a pretty significant detriment. I do think, Robbie Greer tweeted out, loses more EPA than any other quarterback on quarterback sacks. So yeah, it is significant, right? And it's not just the fact that he's getting sacked. It's the fact that he is almost inducing the pressure, or not really capable of handling the pressure.
He's had strip
sacks, but he's just like, he's inviting the pressure in a lot of ways, where he looks like a statue in the pocket at certain points. And, we've seen it. We've seen him, his ability to run. Obviously, we love his quarterback rushing prop percentage numbers, but he has been a guy that just is like standing there, inviting the pressure. Seems almost like unaware of the pressure in his face or surrounding him, and he's taking a lot more sacks than what he needs to. He's just not really, throwing the football away, those sorts of things. So it's tough to see him as, PFF's number 1 passing grade option here in 2021. Maybe it's more reflective of the position as a whole. He has been really accurate, but he has been doing a lot of things like that you personally focus on that. A lot of other people just don't take into account. That's, the turnover worthy plays, which do factor into the passing grade, but the sacks, and they've just been way too much for them to be, a top tier team in the NFL right now, from my perspective.
I mean, this stuff factors in, but it's just not nearly as weighted as heavily as it is in something like EPA. So right now, Burrow, number 1, he's number 1 in his offensive grade, not just passing grade. So he's number 1 in his offensive grade for quarterbacks, and his EPA per play, he's 16th. Of 34 qualifying quarterbacks who have at least, I think it's 200 plays so far this year. So, he's kind of middle of the pack. And I think that's the big difference is these high leverage plays that he's losing EPA on the sacks and on the strip sacks and things like that. So what do you think about playoffs for the Bengals? Because you have this muddled area where now the Browns are looking a little bit struggling there. You had them, you have the Browns, you have the Ravens who are struggling. You have the Steelers. I mean, maybe they would be your preferred option amongst those choices. I think that the Chargers should be in a tier above those guys. I don't think I guess what I would say was, I think the Bengals belong in that kind of tier, maybe at the top of that tier, and not really in the next tier up with the Chargers and some other teams like maybe the Bills. What do you think?
Yeah, definitely. I agree with you. I think the Chiefs are obviously in a tier of their own right now. Then I would put in, the Bills, the Chargers. I am lower on the Patriots than other people, but I do still think they are, that team in there. And then it depends on,
what about the Colts? I think the Colts are better than the Bengals too, Yeah.
I would say the Colts are like that, maybe the cutoff team that should still be in that second tier. And then I do think the Bengals are probably the team below that, but those are the teams that the Bengals are going to face in the first round of the playoffs if they do end up winning the AFC North, right? They're going to face that 5th seed. That's either going to be the Colts or the Chargers, and they're not going to be favored in either one of those games, right? So they're going to be, home dogs in the first round of the playoffs, which isn't all that enticing. They just haven't shown it, right? And they don't really have a good defense. I know Joe Burrow has a lot of weapons. We are kind of seeing them kind of regress back to the mean, and they were really successful early on the season with Ja'Marr Chase getting some deep shots connected, and that's kind of, fallen by the wayside a little bit here. So they just haven't performed up to the offensive expectation that I would have, especially with T. Higgins getting back. So I'm concerned about them. I think, it looks like they're going to make the playoffs based on PFF simulation, but they're just not a team. I think they're definitely a team that people will probably be excited about facing in the first round of the playoffs for sure.
Yeah. I think they're a team that can maybe can squeak out win at home, the first week, but they can't stack wins. They're not ready to stack wins in the playoffs at this point. And the offseason for them, I skip ahead a little bit here, but the offseason for them, I mean, you just pour whatever you can into the offensive line investment. And they are a team that, of course, very, very bright future, as I mentioned last week for them. This year, though, going to be difficult to stack some wins. All right, that closes it off for us. Thank you again, Ben, for joining me. Follow Ben on Twitter at PFF_Ben Brown. Make sure you're following all of his betting recommendations because, it's just hot. That is very, very hot hit rate here. And you rate and review the pod if you get a chance. Otherwise, I'll be coming back at you on Friday to review the Thursday night game. I guess I'll also review the Tuesday games as we didn't have a chance to do that as part of this pod. And then we'll be back at you next Tuesday with Ben for another wrap up for the week. Until then, have a good week.